Welcome to Pittsburgh Earth Days, the Dirt Podcast, featuring Grant Ervin, live from the Point Park University Center for Media Innovation. Here is your host, Grant Ervin.
Hello, and welcome to the latest of the Dirt Podcast, bringing you all the dirt on green technology, sustainability, and much more. I'm your host, Grant Ervin, the Chief Resilience Officer for the City of Pittsburgh. Today's podcast is brought to you by Duquesne Light, UPMC Health Plan, Pitt, Ohio, Carmuse, Port Authority of Allegheny, BNY Mellon, and Giant Eagle. Today, we'll be talking with the Head of Sustainability and Social Responsibility for Covestro, LLC, Rebecca Lucore. Rebecca has deep experience working for sustainability and diversity in the workplace and is currently on the Board of Directors of Sustainable Pittsburgh, the Board of Directors for Chatham University, and is on the Advisory Board President for Bear Center and the Covestro Center for Community Engagement at Robert Morris University. Rebecca, that's quite a CV. Welcome to the Dirt, and we're so happy to have you here with us.
Thank you.
So how have you been doing? It's been a while since we've had a chance to sit down together.
Yeah. It's been interesting. Been doing good. Challenging time. Very fortunate, not as challenged as it is for a lot of people. So very fortunate and thankful for that. But never been busier in the work of sustainability and social responsibility, and it's been a crazy time. It
has definitely been a crazy time. Let's jump right into it, because one of the things I was really excited to talk with you about is the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, or also known as the SDGs. You've been a real leader in this space, a real leader here in Pittsburgh for us. In fact, when I think about my engagement with the SDGs, I think of you. And I think about the work that you guys have done through Think 30 and other activities in terms of engaging the community in a greater awareness around the Sustainable Development Goals. Could you tell me a little bit about, maybe for the audience, what are the Sustainable Development Goals, and how has Covestro and your work specifically been influenced by them?
Sure, absolutely. So the UN Sustainable Development Goals were put together globally with a deadline of 2030. So let's in a I think a small amount of time tackle some of the greatest world issues and problems. And what I love about these goals are 17 of them, and 17 is always my favorite because it's partnerships for the goals.
Right.
You can't do any of these goals in a vacuum, alone, no organization, no entity, no community, government, etc., private sector. We must partner together. So I think 17 is one of the most important. But what I also love about them is because when you're working the world of sustainability like we do, sometimes people get caught up on, that's about energy savings and that's about the environment. And it's more than that. It's the social side of things too. It's in the interconnectivity of how communities work together from poverty and hunger and education to cleaner energy and they all work together, and that's what the goals are. They're very diverse, and they cover everything and how they work together.
As a corporation, how did Covestro come to the Sustainable Development Goals? I mean, can you talk about the genesis a little bit of corporate engagement and how the company, which I think is one of the things that's fascinating about how the company has embedded the goals into the work that you do?
Yeah, we have, for sure. It was actually a really opportune time for us when the goals came about, when they were first announced out of the UN. We were carving out at the same exact time from a long history of Bayer Material Science as part of Bayer into a new company called Covestro. And we, from that very moment that we became Covestro, we decided we are embedding sustainability into our business strategy, our innovation strategy. And so it was a really great time to sign on, be one of the first signers to support the goals and be part of the Global Compact out of the UN. And we were excited about it because we see it as a roadmap. It really can help guide. And one of the first exercises as a company globally is we went through all 17 goals and we said, let's see which ones we touch. And we found that we touched parts of all 17. Now, we'll never say we're clearly impacting all, because obviously some are more deeply than others, but it was really interesting to see that we touch in some way or another through, our company policies, our HR practices, our technologies, our materials, our resources, research, we touch, and through our donations and our grants, everything.
Could you maybe just to take a step back there and talk about how, first, I guess, what is Covestro?
Sure. Yeah.
And you know what is it that I mean, it's kind of a somewhat of a household name here in Pittsburgh, I think, because of its history. You mentioned bare material sciences and kind of that work, but maybe what is Covestro, and then could you give an example of an SDG that connects to the work?
Yeah, sure. So Covestro is a material science company. So it's all based on innovation. We're part of the chemical industry. And you find our materials in almost everything. A large part of the inside of your car. We're in housing and construction, so we're very involved with green building now and how we can make materials more efficient. We have a little bit of touch into healthcare through equipment and hospitals, a little bit through cosmetics and coatings. A lot of the bridges in Pittsburgh have our coating on them.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So very, very diverse in terms of material science, and we've been around for a lot of time. So sustainability is really important to us. So some of the goals, when you look at and even if you just look at like equity in the workplace and some of the diversity UN goals, those tie into how we look at our HR practices, how we treat our employees, future employees, current employees. And then you look at some of the other goals. You look at our systems for supply chain and along the supply chain, and you can wrap in and tie to some of the goals. Then when you look at things like hunger and education, we're not in the business of those issues, but we are in the sense that we exist in communities, and we have to support our communities, and we look at challenges with those topics in our communities, and we help fund or develop programs to tackle some of those issues. So there's really a diverse way we touch the
That's
goals.
interesting. And so what's your when you talk about those communities, I mean, you're more than just Pittsburgh.
We are, yeah.
Maybe explain that to folks.
Sure, yeah. So our global headquarters is in Leverkusen, Germany. Our North American headquarters is here in Pittsburgh, so we're really proud of that. We love Pittsburgh. We've been here a long time, looking back at our history. And we're also in other sites in the U.S., like West Virginia and Ohio. So we have, and then our largest manufacturing site in North America is in Baytown, Texas, outside of Houston.
Okay.
So I would say, Pittsburgh and Baytown are our largest employee populations.
And what is that footprint in terms of number of employees? Or
So here in Pittsburgh, it fluctuates. I'd say close to 900 here in Pittsburgh.
Wow, so that's a sizable footprint.
It is, yeah.
And when you talk about the SDGs and community engagement, what does that look like, I guess?
So we our employees are fantastic. As soon as we carved out, it was so funny. I literally. We got the news internally that we're going to be carving out and aren't going to be part of Bayer anymore, which is huge news.
Yeah.
And you
was
you
4 or 5 years ago.
It was our 5th anniversary was this fall.
Right.
And you think instantly people are, well, I have a job, what will happen? And I'm sure there were the thoughts, but I was inundated with phone calls and emails asking, are we still going to have our science program? Are we still going to do this in the community? I could not believe the interest in those topics, and are we still doing that? So we instantly made sure within a month that we had a program, a name, a strategic plan on how we're going to engage.
That's
and
interesting.
we got our employees engaged. And it's really, you talk about these programs and like sustainability, that it's kind of, you need support from the top down, but our employees really drive the direction of where we're engaged in the community.
One of the things I've been really interested in has been the topic of the circular economy and circularity, which is, I think, very more prevalent in Europe right now, but starting to come more and more in conversations here in the U.S. As a material science company, effectively, you get to see a lot of this. Can you shine some insights maybe in terms of like product development and how you're thinking about both sourcing as well as end product reuse or things of that nature?
Yeah, so super important topic for us right now. We've made some big global commitments that we want to be fully circular and, in a quick amount of time. And for a company like us, it's hard because we are so far down on the food chain. We make the raw materials that go into things,
Right.
and end up in an end product. So for us, we provide the beginning material, but how do we have control over what it ends up with and then the end life of that product? So, they're complicated discussions for a company like that, but we're doing a lot of innovative work around it's just sourcing different materials, looking at biomaterials. How can we make things more biodegradable? Make sure that the raw material we're starting with is different. And one of the examples I'd like to talk about, and it's not fully circular, but it's a step in that direction, is our Cardion product, where we have learned how to capture carbon and use it as a raw material to replace some of the petroleum-based feedstock in mattresses. So they're selling mattresses that have captured carbon in them and less petroleum feedstock. So little things like that.
What is
really
Cardion? Is that like a brand name for
It is for the product, the material. And we have a facility, manufacturing facility that we built in Germany that goes and produces this product.
Okay.
So things like that, and it's top priority right now. That's probably the top of the topics for our company right now is circularity and how we get there. And you probably, I know you see this in your role. Recycling plays such a big role in circularity, and for communities that companies like ours exist in and regions, and I don't think in our country we're quite there yet. I think there's still a lot of work.
Not at all. I mean, one of the things, this is interesting, right before the pandemic hit, I was a part of a 10-city cohort that went, U.S. cities that participated in an exchange with the Swedish Energy Ministry. And it was a fascinating learning experience because we got to see the connections of energy with product material development. And so, it's interesting what is happening in Europe right now. For example, EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility, where exactly what you're talking about, where manufacturers are saying, like, at the beginning of the supply chain, how do we think first, at those basic building block material science issues? Because at the end of life of the product, we're going to have to find a way to kind of reuse it. And so in Sweden, it was amazing. All the Nordics, and I think Germany's probably included in that, where you're seeing a lot of this. They're seeing that full life cycle accountability. And it's not just for the goodness of their hearts, right? Like, they're seeing that there's a value and a benefit to all of those materials.
Yeah.
The one that blew me away was lithium. And so in Sweden, there's a whole effort right now around lithium, or they call it urban mining.
Okay.
And basically, like,
I've read something about that.
Yeah, like basically going to like old landfills that have been decommissioned and mining for lithium, because it's a rare earth metal. We're not producing any more of it, but there's a ton of it out there because it's been in greeting cards and bad Christmas ties with Santa Claus on it, and
exactly
everything like that. So do you guys see that as part of your evaluation within like the material science space?
Yeah, definitely. We're always doing life cycle analysis. That's always even before sustainability was a topic everyone talked. I mean, for our company, like life cycle analysis has been very important always, and even more so in the circularity discussions.
That's awesome.
Yep.
Maybe just to talk about you for a second here. How did you come into your current role as the basically the Chief Sustainability Officer for Covestro? Maybe if you could talk a little bit about that journey and also about your role and position and the importance of it in the company.
Yeah. So I've been with Covestro, Bayer Material Science Bayer, then Miles before that, 25 years now. So it's been a long time. I started when we were just Miles here, Miles Inc., in Pittsburgh, and I was an intern. I was a student at Duquesne University. It was not a direct path. Nobody talked about sustainability. There were no jobs in sustainability. There wasn't even heard of. I actually started down a different direction in a communications department and worked in every single area of communication. And at the time for Bayer, Their focus on social engagement fell under the communications group, and I found myself heading up their foundation and getting involved in education topics and working, spending a lot of great years working around the country with city schools in like Kansas City, Missouri, and Connecticut, and different places, helping them reform education, so to more hands-on inquiry-based. So it was great doing all of that, and I stepped away after about 15 years of that, and I went and worked more on the business side in BMS, and was a chief of staff for our president at the time. And but I realized stepping away, while I learned a lot, that this is really my passion. So when we carved out to become Covestro, I was asked to get back over on the social engagement side and sustainability side. Okay. So we have a chief sustainability officer out of Global in Germany. So I'm responsible for this region, and of course we have somebody responsible in Asia because it's a larger region. And then we have a new sustainability officer there who just joined us over the summer.
Terrific. So it takes like a regional point of view?
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So I'm really, of course we all work closely together, and there's global goals that we help support in the region. But when you ask about that, it's kind of the importance of having a role like that in a company. It's really, really critical, especially at a time like this. And to have roles, especially to have like a chief sustainability officer that we have globally that is, pretty high up in management and directly has a line into your board of management. And that's how you get sustainability embedded and integrated into your business strategies, and not just like a side project that you're working on. You have real KPIs that are tied to the business and sustainability. And same in this region too. While we support global KPIs and global roles, we have facilities here. We have a lot of employees here, so we look at how we can engage and how we can help support that goals. But there's been a lot of conversations lately. It's funny, inside businesses, almost like we kind of laugh. Our controversy is, where does sustainability belong? So it's good to have somebody leading it. It's good to have that tie into board of management and someone to lead it strategically. But we talk about, should we just have a little department, and okay, over there in that corner, they're responsible for sustainability. We decided some years ago that wasn't enough, that we need to embed it everywhere across the business. And so we work hard to do that. If you work in finance, it's your job. If you work in HR, it's your job. And everyone contributes to it in a different way and understands the importance. And we actually, at some point a few years ago, we had brainstorming sessions in different departments like supply chain and HR and finance, and they figured out how can they, as a group in their work that they do, impact sustainability, and what kind of changes do they need to make, et cetera.
Where does that start, I guess, in terms of, you talked about the importance of having a centralized person, like a global sustainability point of contact, and then the regional directors. But how do you work on that embedding? I think that is like one of the biggest challenges. You've seen more companies, starting to bring in a sustainability person. Sometimes they put them off in the corner.
Yeah.
Talk about maybe first kind of the detriment, I'm going to say, to that, and the importance about having somebody, with an omniscient point of view.
I think of it, I'm going to tie it back to how we started the conversation, the UN goals, and how I love goal number 17, and partnership for the goal. Because if you take any of the goals and just work on one of them in a silo, it's just not going to work. And the work of one goal affects other goals as well. And it's the same way when you're in an organization. If you have someone, doing sustainability off in the corner in their own little tower and silo, and not working with all the other groups and departments, it's just not going to work very well. They need to be talking to supply chain and procurement, and just looking at issues like supplier diversity. They hit so many of the UN goals too, and procurement. And looking at which are really hard, Scope 3 emissions. I mean, things that are out of your control. Yeah, I'm sure you know all about that. That's a tough topic. you can't do that alone. You need to work across, not only do we need to work across our company, but across the oceans and the other regions, because we have manufacturing all over the world. So,
do the SDGs, to go back to that a second, does that help create the common language? I mean, you're a company that's working multiple continents, multiple countries. Do the goals help unify you, you think? I think
they helped push us into that embedding discussion early on when we adopted the goals, because they really are a roadmap, and they're so simple. I mean, for anyone and for any of your listeners that aren't as familiar, to go out to the UN website and just type in UN Sustainable Development Goals to see that. I mean, you're familiar with that visual of the colored squares. It's very bright.
You got to find the marketing company that came up with that,
I know.
Right?
It's great.
They earned their stripes.
They did. I have a huge poster of that in my office. Of course, I haven't seen it since February, but it's great, and it's just so simple, but it says so much. It just, you kind of follow them, and you start seeing, oh yeah, this connects to this, and you talked about Think 30 early on, and one of my favorite.
Maybe explain that.
Yeah.
It's pretty fundamental.
Yeah, so one of the things we wanted to do when we carved out, we started working with the goals. One thing I noticed is in Pittsburgh, back in, I think, 2016, beginning in 2017, I was talking to my counterparts and other corporations. No one was talking about the goals, and I'd mention them, and what? Like, nobody really knew what they were. So,
and they're relatively new.
They were really new. Yeah,
they built on the Millennium Development Goals.
They did, and nobody really talked about those.
No, they haven't had the visibility. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, you're right. So we decided let's just have a gathering. Let's introduce the goals to everyone here in the region, but let's make it really diverse discussion, not just businesses, but let's have the nonprofits there, and the other private sector and government and universities, and we had just general citizens come that really aren't affiliated, or retirees. Just how can I be involved, and real fruitful discussions on what the goals mean. We like to dig deep into what are some of the challenges in the regions, and we always try to divide it up kind of with the pillars of sustainability. So you look at the economic, the social, the environmental components. Let's get people that aren't the usual people talking about topics in the region. We really wanted to uncover really interesting and impactful work going on by really impactful, innovative people that you don't hear about a lot. So that's kind of how it started.
And one of the great things about that and I had the fortune, thanks to you, to participate in that, is the number of I don't know, Covestrans. Do you have a name for?
Not really, but I like that.
All right, we'll call
Covestrans.
them Covestrans. The number of Covestrans that are a part of that event.
Yeah.
Both in putting it together, but also as the audience.
Yeah.
So
they were proud.
Yeah, and I think like that. The thing that I heartened about that was, you guys are students of sustainability. Right, and there's a learning culture there that yourself and your former CEO Jerry McCleary, I think that to bring this in and elevate sustainability really requires everybody to be a participant.
It does, and it is constant learning. I mean, we're all learning every day. Like, I don't think if you ever feel like you've plateaued or you've learned it all, then something isn't right.
Yeah, exactly.
Something's wrong.
Are there things within Think 30 that, just to that point, that employees and employees either took or you guys were able to say, hey, here's an idea, can we work towards this, or can we change a process or a practice? Or inside the company? Inside of the company, yeah. So a lot of things inside and outside the company happened. So we went out on a limb and we said we're going to try this, and we did the first event in 2017, I believe it was, that we thought was real successful, and we had about 300 people, and then we did another large event with close to 500 in 2018, and then you probably recall we decided the next year to do a couple smaller events on specific topics so people could roll their sleeves up and dig in and really work. And one was healthy neighborhoods, and one was
something I'm really passionate with 3 teenage boys, and watching their minds, and especially my older one, look for where he wants to go to college, what he wants to do. They're so impressionable at that age. And it's a great time to introduce all this and open their eyes to, oh my gosh, there's so much you could do. And this is how you can get involved. It is. I mean, literally. So we had a youth quake that year. I was really excited about 200 high school students from around the region, and introduced, a lot of them. What are the UN goals?
Right.
And introduced them, and we had university folks there. And so going back to your question, our employees were really excited about that event. They were excited. So we carried some of those learnings internally into training, like different things that HR do. We carried some of the practices in and introductions. Simple things like bring your child to work day, which is really big in our company. We have a half a day of planned activities. So when you bring your child or children that day, they spend half a day in our cafeteria with planned experiments and education and just all kinds of cool. Yeah, so we even got the UN goals wrapped into that.
Okay.
And so I think it gave us a lot of ideas on how to educate at different levels, from children through adults and our employees, on the topics, and inspire people to get involved.
What are some things that you guys have done, just that expansion of the employee engagement and sustainability? I mean, is that a hands-on, intentional activity for you in your work, or in terms of like those, is it trainings, or like what are some examples of? Because I'm always this is self-serving,
yes.
right? So I'm always interested in my role. One of the things that I'm just a thesis. One of the thesis I have for 2021 is drill down to drawdown.
Yes.
And it is a play on the book Drawdown, which
love that book.
It's like tagged,
big fan,
highlighted.
Oh, love it. Coffee stains.
Yes. It's one of my favorite
I think
books.
my dog chewed it recently.
You're like, get away from that. It's fine. And what I've found is we are doing a lot of these activities that are prescribed in the book Drawdown. And for listeners, it's a book that basically kind of catalogs, I think it's the 80 top, actions that we the collective we could take on reducing emissions and addressing the climate challenge. And, so everything from educating women and girls to
just
farming.
One of my favorite.
And we're going to hit
we'll get back to
we're going to hit on that.
Yeah.
And you've been reading ahead in the questions. But energy systems, transportation systems, et cetera, material science is a big piece of it. But the thing that I've found is no one person can do it, which is oftentimes, I think folks say, well, we have a sustainability person.
Yeah.
And it's like, we're done with that, right?
Yeah.
But no one person can do it. And the drill down component is, and you touched upon this, and I'd love you to go a little deeper, is that it's the procurement people. It's the folks in legal.
Yep.
It is the manufacturing team, or public works in our case. It's the people that are implementing and driving projects are so essential.
They are.
To the delivery of these activities. But in a lot of cases, their training isn't the same training as a sustainability person might have, right? So what are some of the things that you're doing to kind of bring the team along, I guess, and because it's there, they want to take action.
They do.
And they're trying to figure it out too.
Yeah.
And so like you're learning together on how to buy something, or how to write a contract, and those sorts of things. I mean, what are you seeing in that space?
I would describe everything you just say kind of in a clause, little by little. So the first part of the question, when you were saying reference back to Think 30 and the work and some of the things we took out of it that we brought back into the company. The thing I think we learned the most from Think 30 that we brought into, that'll come to your next question, in general, and I'm sure you see this in the city, these changes, these things you talk about and drawdown, that you talk about these big lofty UN goals, they're not going to happen when we need a whole government of this country to. there's barriers, there's challenge. It's so hard. It happens at the local level. I think if you get enough local levels doing the right things, those things add up to big change.
Whether it's the city or your
a
facility
community,
in Baytown.
Yeah. And that's kind of like what we've brought inside the company too. You know, little by little can equal big change. So it's just I think it started with every department and every group talking about, Global kind of provided a presentation. Here's our non-financial KPIs. They're important to sustainability. How can you support them? And it's just a matter of putting that up on the wall and a group of, procurement talking, okay, yeah, we kind of affect that one, and really having deep, fruitful discussions. Well, how? What can we do better? What can we do differently? And the other thing that really, I think that's different with a business rather than a government entity or an NGO is we are part of big like trade organizations in our industry and everything, and there's a lot of power there, and so we help
in those collective
networks, and so we can help push discussions on circularity, on recycling things within our industry. I mean, we're part of the plastics industry. Plastics in the ocean is a huge topic, and it's really people were going after all the single-use plastic and everything. We don't make single-use plastic, but we're still part of the industry. So we invested in the topic, and we're just at the table with everybody else trying to create change on that because it's our industry. It doesn't matter if we don't make the single-use; we still make plastics.
Which goes to your point about back to the goals, like they're all interconnected. So if you're talking about circularity, the idea of bioplastics it becomes really important.
It does. Yeah, absolutely. So I just love saying that little by little. I think, little things, incremental things, you don't need to make huge splashes and change, because usually when you do that, it's not long lasting.
I want to hit something real quick before we go to the next topic. You've used the term KPIs, or key performance indicators. How important is it to have the data? And that's kind of a easy question.
Yeah.
But like, how do you guys go about setting what data matters, right?
Data is so important. And they primarily set that and do that. At our global headquarters. But it's so important because ESG reporting is so important, and other types of reporting for investors, et cetera.
ESG is environmental, social governance reporting,
You need the data. You need transparency. You can make goals, but how do you show that you're inching towards them or you're reaching them? So data is critical, and there's still a lot of conversation out there continuously. Like you said, what is the right data? And when the UN goals were set forth by the United Nations, and people like us signed up and on, guess what? It didn't come with, it didn't come with a manual.
No.
It didn't tell you how to measure anything. So we had to, you have to think about what kind of data is the best, and how do we, when you're looking at hunger, well, what kind of data do we look? Is it number of people who this, or it's, I think they're ever evolving discussions. I don't think there's one right answer yet that I see.
Yeah, it's such a moving topic. I mean, we, just a quick note about us. We haven't caught up for a while. So sorry for listeners. This is a little, Rebecca and I haven't seen each other for a little bit. But we just completed our what's called voluntary local review. So it's effectively an assessment of our municipal performance based upon the 17 SDGs. And one of the things that we did was the report, which just got released last week, effectively measures city services against the 17 global goals. And what we did was it's basically anecdotal, and which was done intentionally because we created or treated ourselves, our city employees, as a community. Typically we're going out talking to residents and doing community plans and things of that nature, but it was the first time that we've looked internally at ourselves. And one thing, employees really like the opportunity to talk about the work they're doing.
Yeah, I'm sure.
The second thing was it's allowed us to start to look at how different departments are communicating or can communicate with one another, and how they can collaborate, which I think is interesting. And one of the things that we're looking at as the next step is to start to effectively drill down into what that data is inside of the stories that the city employees are generating, whether that's in the transportation network or facilities or number of meals that are served to seniors and children and things of that nature, to start telling a data narrative. And part of the hope, I think, is that with that, one, it gives greater transparency and visibility to residents, right, who are, our customers.
Yeah.
But I'm really kind of interested to see what we can do with it.
Yeah.
In terms of process improvement and things of that nature. And I don't know if you've seen that in like your ESG reporting that you do. Like, do you like pick up the report and you're like, oh, here's an idea?
Yeah, we don't do. We're always continually, like I said, they kind of set that more, and our German global team works on that. But what we do then from a regional standpoint is we kind of look at that, and sometimes stuff needs tailored. I mean, it's not always applicable to each region.
Right.
Obviously, there's different governmental regulations when you talk about emissions and various things. So we're always looking for continuous things. But you hit on something. You said a word in there. You said the word stories. And
yeah.
I just wanted to go back to that because that's so important in sustainability work. And, it's not analytical. It's more creative. But storytelling is so important.
Yeah.
It's so important. It is. It's real. And it's critical in creating change. And I'll hold on to what I want to say on that till we get into diversity. But
let's go there. I know this is a passionate topic for you, and you see this in the work in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion work that Covestro is leading on. But that, specifically into that, the issues of gender equality, which are a key component of the SDGs. How have you, worked to bring that into the forefront of Covestro's local work? I mean, that is, I think, one of the things that's most exciting. If you're to hold up, one of the shining lights of the many that you guys have is that kind of work in the gender equity component.
Yeah. Well, two things. One, we have awesome. Anyone locally in the region probably knows Dina Clark, who's our head
rock star.
Diversity and inclusion, and her and I work together weekly. You cannot work apart when you're doing sustainability work. It's all intertwined. It's so important. And equity and inclusion, you can't have sustainability without it. You can't have sustainable communities without it. It's just integral. When you start looking at issues and challenges, first of all, I think this was one of the things that came out, I think, in the second Think 30 and this isn't a Covestro, this just is like a Rebecca thing, a personal passion of mine. But, I've spent my life, going to meetings and having conversations all around community things, from the days back running a foundation. And it always bothered me because sometimes I would sit back and look around the table and I'm like, we're talking about how we should fund or tackle, this issue, but it's not an issue any of us are facing. And why aren't any of the people that are facing this issue part of the discussion? So that goes back to the stories.
Yeah.
Like, we need to hear first counts and experiences in their stories. They need to be part of the solution. They're living, breathing it every day.
Right.
And that's when you look at being more inclusive in your conversations, they become more inclusive in your solutions. It's critical. It's important. We had the one smaller session for Think 30 on healthy neighborhoods, and it was really eye-opening. I think we had some people from your group as part of that discussion.
Yeah.
And when you look at healthy neighborhoods, what does that mean? It means so much. It's almost every single one of the SGDs. I mean, when you're looking at, do you have access to produce and healthy food? Do you have, a library? How are the schools? Housing, everything. So everything's interrelated. And I think for Pittsburgh, diversity and inclusion is probably, like a lot of cities, it's challenging, but we have, I think we've had issues with gentrification that we've talked about. We are trying to do a better job in our workplaces, including, more people at the table and hiring differently. And that's not just specific to Pittsburgh, but I think it's over exasperated in Pittsburgh. And the pandemic this year has just, people say, oh, it really made some gaps and things. They were gaps that were always there.
Right.
I think it just highlighted them, accentuated them, and really brought them to light. But they were always there.
We talk a lot about that when I have my resilience hat on, is that any time that you have an underlying stressor, in this case, gender inequality, racial and gender inequality, going hand in hand.
Yep.
That anytime that you have an underlying stressor like that, when a city or a community experiences a shock, an immediate negative impact like a pandemic, those stressors are immediately accelerated or multiplied, right? The shock event creates a force multiplier. And you've seen that in Pittsburgh. I mean, prior to, I guess it would have been 2017, 2018, then 2019, we did a series of evaluations, first through the Pittsburgh Equity Indicators Report, and then through the Pittsburgh Gender Equity Commission, where you see that disproportionate impact being felt by Black and brown children, predominantly in issues of like asthma, for example.
Yep.
But then also African American women disproportionately bearing the brunt, not just environmentally, but economically, in the education space, et cetera. How can a company, or how does a company, you mentioned the work that Dina does in diversity, equity, inclusion, talk about the genesis of that program maybe too. Like, that's a good example. That's a story into itself of like how companies can be actors and leaders, and maybe dive into that a little bit.
On those topics.
On those topics, right? Like, we know the problems.
Yeah.
How do we address them? Like, that's the question, right?
I think it's so important. Again, it's you need to address it not through a tunnel, but from a diverse approach and from a lot of different angles. So we can address it through leadership and support. I'll just throw out the organization Tally and at Carnegie Mellon, that for some of the listeners, it's an organization that's really trying to get African American community in leadership positions who already are at companies, but get them elevated and give them mentoring and placed on boards and a lot of support. And it's a great program. So you can step up and support programs like that. You have to walk the talk. You have to embed that approach into your own practices, how you treat your employees, how you hire employees, how you recruit for employees. It has to be embedded in all of your practices. It really has to start there. It's really wrong to start by, we're going to support organizations that are doing good work in this area. Oh, but we're not really doing good work in this area. So you really need
lead by example.
Yes, you really need to start at home. And one of the things that's been really exciting for us and our employees who are really interested in this topic, is the nonprofit sector. So for companies, we have big, large HR departments. We have people around, a lot of people that can help lead those things and the right policies. Nonprofit organizations don't, probably even in government as much, don't have huge HR departments, and especially for smaller organizations.
It's difficult,
It's hard. And that's always one of the first things probably cut or set to the side. Well, we need to do this first and not. But it's important for them. So back to the employee engagement, one of the things our employees get involved with is our Skillshare program with Robert Morris University. So they're so excited about this goes back many years now to one of the market crashes when and we were in the Bayer days, but all the foundations were on hold, and everyone froze their endowments because the market crash, you couldn't give out money. So at that time I looked around and I said, you know what, like I'm watching all these big private foundations that have to be on hold. But what we have, they don't have, is we have massive amounts of employees with technical expertise. And that's when we worked with Robert Morris to kind of start this Skillshare program where...
Is this through your work on being on the board too? Or
yeah,
is this
it is.
that? Okay.
It is. And it goes beyond Covestro now. It's a lot of companies...
This is with the Bayer, just to declare, the Bayer Center for Nonprofit Management.
Yeah. So...
quick shout out for Peggy, one of my favorite people.
I know. She's great. Peggy's wonderful. And so is her staff. And our employees have the opportunity for 2 to 3 months to be consultants for a nonprofit and to help them through a challenge, something that they would never have the capacity or the monetary means to pay to have addressed. And what we're finding is there's a lot of work to be done in the HR area. And it's so important when you talk about D&I because we're able to help them integrate them, help them write plans, our employees, help them set up manuals and handbooks, things that, they don't have the time to oftentimes think about because they have critical needs, community needs to meet.
It's such a huge, having been on a number of nonprofit boards, being on a couple now,
Yeah.
Having those assets is really critical, I think, because when you're in the organization, you're so focused on mission.
Yeah.
And delivery of either product or service.
Yep.
And to think about kind of that supportive infrastructure is difficult.
It falls to the wayside.
So it's such an important service. Just to take a step further on kind of the issues of gender, how the connection between gender and climate. We've talked a little bit about climate change early on in the conversation, but what are some of the things, either from your position, but how do you bridge and bring those issues of gender and climate together? They're inextricably linked.
Yeah, they are.
But in terms of like the activation of addressing whether it's a climate mitigation issue or climate adaptation challenges, I don't know if you have thoughts there.
Yeah, well, it starts back to our one of our favorite books we were talking about, Drawdown. Catherine Wilkinson, one of my favorite people, she was involved with Think 30. She was one of the contributing scientists and research to Drawdown. Really smart person. I remember, I never thought about it before. I remember the moment when she was sitting there and said that one of the top 8 ways to mitigate climate change is educating women and girls. And I sat there and I thought, out of all the things we can do in the environment and change, I never thought of that as being, that high up. And it's eye-opening, and it's so true, and it's why the UN goals are so interconnected, because when you look at in our country too, but in developing countries where women and girls don't have the opportunity for education, or a lot of children are sent to work to help support the family instead of school, or just don't have access to schools, we're missing out on a future like thinking and innovation and diversity around the table. You take a whole segment of the population out and talking about how to tackle challenges, you just lose so much. It's so important.
And not to let the cat out of the bag, because I do want people to read the book too, but what does that mean in a developed, because you have a global footprint. I'd be interested in your perspective on this, because a lot of that, the context of that book and why women and girls is important, there's a development economics component to that. What does that mean in a Pittsburgh sense, though? Like in the region that you're seeing, how can women and girls, also self-serving, I'm a daughter of 2 little girls. Yeah. So how can women and girls be more active in the climate movement, I guess?
I think a couple
How are
of things.
they? There's a lot out there.
Yeah, they
I don't want to
are.
discount that.
Look at
That's
Greta
also,
Thunberg. I
mean, well, even locally. I think a lot of our leadership, yourself
they
included,
are.
That there's a lot of women who are in leadership positions that are taking the fight, taking on the climate fight.
Yeah.
So maybe just to dive into that.
It's funny, and I don't pretend to know anything about this, and I don't study psychology or anything, but there's people in those fields too that say, just how the gender differences and how females are wired and more thinking differently and more passion around the thinking sometimes is why it's important not to leave that out of these climate discussions. It starts early. Just regardless of what career, whether it's climate or if they're going into accounting or girls, I think, unfortunately, they need to be mentored more. They need to be shown role models. They need to see themselves through the eyes of other people, like other women and female leaders, like, wow, I can do that. I can be there. And they have to have aspirations. It's so important. And you need to look at, that sometimes they don't get that in the education system and a just traditional. I mean, you need, companies and other organizations to get involved and fund programs and provide mentorship, which is one of our employees' favorite things to do. They love Strong Women and Girls is one example. I mean, there's so many programs through United Way that provide that kind of mentoring where employees can sign up and be involved. And, it could be a middle school mentor. That's not specific to female, but just in general. And I think something else that's important when you talk about, educating women and girls at Compact Climate, you have to look at just education holistically. So specific to Pittsburgh, when we carved out and we started putting together our strategy for community engagement and what's going to be our focus area and support, education's always been instrumental for our company. And of course, we wanted to continue that. But when you sat back and really looked at it, we can put the best of the best equipment, education programs, whatever, and say we could put in every school. There's still barriers. So if kids come to school hungry, they can't learn. If kids are living in poverty or homeless or in foster, they don't always make it to school. So again, sustainability is holistic. You have to look at everything. So we started looking at and looking at some of the barriers, and a lot of people don't know that food insecurity is huge in our region. They don't. I think
1 in 5 families.
Yeah, I mean it's unbelievable. So we chose to focus on that too because education alone is not going to move the needle. You need to look at everything that prevents people from being educated. So that just keeps going back to the holistic approach of sustainability and why it's so important.
It's just to pick up on that real quick. One of my colleagues and team member of mine, Shelley Denka, today just completed a report. She's our food policy guru in the city of Pittsburgh, and her and a team of really dedicated interns and fellows that we were able to bring together this summer through what's called the Watson Fellowship Program, helped to engage community members and pull together the what's called the Feed Pittsburgh report. And it's one of the most eye-opening pieces that I've been a part of in terms of identifying this issue you talked about, food insecurity.
Yeah.
That if 1 in 5 people throughout the region don't know where their next meal is going to come from, what an impediment that is to everything else.
It is.
And it's a scary thing. And disproportionately what happens is that is being shouldered, that challenge or burden is being shouldered by women, right?
Yeah. A lot of single moms too. Yep.
Exactly. And one of the things I wanted to talk with you about is, this pandemic that we're in the midst of, and it's a sobering statistic, is I think it's around almost 800,000 women have left the workforce for one reason or another, and which is a different juxtaposition versus the 2007-2008 where it was a man's recession, I would call it, where you had a lot of folks in the construction industry, heavy industry, home building, et cetera, where that just ceased.
Yeah.
And we've seen still the longitudinal impacts of that. Given what we know, what are some of the long-term effects that we could feel from that for women? But also, what are some of the opportunities? And specifically, one of the things, I'd be interested to hear from you is about this concept of just transition. That we need to find ways to kind of restructure the economy, restructure the environmental challenges. How can we make that a more inclusive process going forward, I guess, and to basically confront this challenge that we're seeing in the workforce?
Wow, there's a lot there.
This isn't softball time.
No, you hit on 10 things.
Rebecca,
I'm like, how much time do I have?
For a while. So
I know.
These are building up.
Wow. Well, first of all, I haven't heard that statistic, and that's alarming. But I can't say I'm surprised. Just looking at my own community and a lot of people. I'm very grateful. I've 3 teenage boys. Independent, self-sufficient. It's been hard on me. But the people that have the young kids that all of a sudden are at home every day that need assistance for school nonstop, I can't even imagine there is no possible way I could continue to do my job and school my kids.
There's a lot of people juggling a lot right now.
I couldn't. I know I couldn't. I'd probably lose my mind. I wouldn't be a very good teacher.
Your husband's a teacher too.
He
right?
is, but he's teaching his own
he's
classes.
Got his own class, right?
He can't help ours. That's the irony. So it's It's an alarming statistic. It really is. It's detrimental. It worries me. The first thing that worries me is 800,000 or whatever the number was, women that had jobs and maybe already went over several hurdles to get a job or good job, who's in a company, organization, wherever they are, that are now have removed themselves because they had to.
To take care of a family
Yeah,
member,
to do
children,
what they have to do during this.
or they might have lost their job.
How do we assure we're not taking 20 steps back in time? How do we get those 800,000 women back in jobs, back into good roles, or not starting from the bottom, kind of bringing them back in? So to go back to just transit, I mean, there's got to be a focus on in a way to make sure that we're not taking a lot of steps backwards, because that's a lot of workforce there, and a lot of movement. And I don't know where the numbers came from. I don't know if that means people leaving on their own or people that were laid off, to females.
These are like Bureau of Labor Statistics numbers.
Yeah. I'm not sure, but that's a lot. So that first of all, that alarms me, and how we get them back, because hopefully this will be over at some point, and schools will be back, and
Right.
and people will be more apt to kind of go back to what they were doing. So the second thing.
Maybe to put it in the context too of like in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
To boil it down, like we can't in Pittsburgh. What are some of those opportunities to effectively create stronger opportunities for the local workforce? And addressing like the SDGs, right? Like,
one thing is, first I'll get that, and first to finish the women thing, I have seen, this is locally too, I have seen so many women take huge risks even during this pandemic and start businesses that have been, successful. It's been also, a challenging time for small business. I think it depends what the business is, but I think Pittsburgh's a really good place for that. There's a lot of innovation, a lot of startups, a lot of interesting, innovative. I'm shocked. I always read my Next Pittsburgh weekly, and
future advertiser. Quick
yes,
plug.
Tracy, thank you. I can't believe the amount of restaurants that in food places. We've become such a foodie town.
Yeah.
But you would think that's all on hold now, but it hasn't been. There's new things opening, and eateries, and they might be opening in smaller ways, and not
providing services differently.
Yeah,
for
and
example.
providing different services. But it's great to see that even with all of the challenges, people aren't stopping their passion, and they're reaching for what they wanted to do.
Do you think there's hope on the innovation front in that regard? Like, do you see kind of the next things coming?
I'll be honest, I haven't noticed so much or followed that and seen a lot on that. Have you, during the pandemic? I've kind of lost sight of. But in general, I think Pittsburgh has a lot going on in that area.
It's one of those things I'm kind of fascinated about, because anytime you have an event, there's going to be somebody somewhere thinking about an innovative way to kind of develop a product, a service.
Yep.
You're talking about women entering into kind of entrepreneurial roles and things of that nature. That's one of the things that I've had my eye out for.
Yeah.
I mean, you've seen some things like indoor air purification, or
capitalizing on the challenges.
Capitalizing
of
on
the
the challenges of the time, which definitely, I mean, we've talked a lot about kind of the work Covestro does in terms of building science. I mean, making healthier buildings is going to be paramount going forward.
Yeah.
That's definitely something I think on the horizon. But the one that sticks with me, and I've talked about this a pretty good deal, is, if you go back to kind of April, May, where everything was kind of shut down, there was a certain appreciation for quiet.
Yes.
The city was quieter.
Yes.
Which there was, for the wrong reasons, but there was definitely benefit to the solitude, which then also brought nature back.
It did.
And you've seen this through improved air quality. There's more deer and things like that running through the.
I've enjoyed watching that all over the country. Like the Golden Gate Bridge, you saw herds of animals. Like it was incredible. And so for you, I mean, and measuring sustainability number, I mean, during that shutdown, the savings and the changes, and again, all over the national news, watching those, hot red zone globes they show around the world when the world shut down. It was amazing. And if anything, I think it elevated sustainability and climate change, and it showed us, oh my gosh, we can do this.
That's right.
We have to figure out how to do it without shutting the world down, but we can do this. I really thought that was an important time.
That's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, Rebecca, we're coming up against time here. This has just been a terrific conversation. I want to thank you for your time, your expertise, the work that you do, not just at Covestro, but the work that you do on behalf of the city and the region in terms of spreading the word around sustainability, but also activating sustainability. And I think that's just an important distinction. So it's been a true pleasure getting to talk to you about these subjects that you know so well, and it's been great for me, and we look to have you back sometime here on the Dirt and talking about what's next. So.
Thank you. It's nice to catch up, and it's always a pleasure. I love this region. I love this city. I came to college here, and I beat the statistic. I stayed because I loved it here, and I still love it here. So it's a pleasure to work on these topics and challenges and try to make it a better place for people that live here.
That's awesome. You're a true asset, and we appreciate you. Well, everyone, that's a wrap of this episode of the Dirt Podcast. Join us next month's episode of the Dirt, where we will be bringing you more of the dirt on green technology, sustainability, and so much more. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. And before I leave, I want to also thank our special friends here at the Center for Media Innovation at Point Park University for the work that they do in producing the show. Thank you for your time and expertise. And thank you for listening. We'll see you next time. Take care.
Awesome.